I want you to just try to picture a scenario for a second. You know, the very specific, deeply painful moment. And honestly, if you've lived it, you know exactly what the air feels like in this memory.
Yeah, you really do. It sticks with you.
Right. So you have finally done the hardest thing imaginable. You set a firm boundary. Or, you know, perhaps you finally packed your bags, loaded up your car in the middle of the day, and you just walked away from a toxic, profoundly abusive relationship.
Which takes an immense amount of courage, by the way.
It really does. So you close the door behind you, you take this deep, shaky breath, and you expect peace. You expect the constant humming chaos in your nervous system to just finally settle down.
But that's usually not what happens.
No, it's not. Instead, your phone buzzes.
Yeah.
And it's not a text from your abuser, it's from your best friend. Or like your sister. Or maybe a coworker you've known and trusted for a decade.
Someone you thought was completely in your corner.
Exactly. And you open the message and they tell you that you are overreacting. They tell you that you are, tearing the family apart. They say things like, look, life is too short. You just need to forgive and forget.
And that right there, that is just a crushing blow.
It is. You are standing in the absolute wreckage of your life, just completely depleted. And the people who are supposed to be holding the flashlight for you are the ones throwing stones.
It is a profoundly disorienting experience. I mean, what makes it so uniquely devastating for the target is the immediate assumption that this must just be a misunderstanding.
Right, like if I just explain it better, they'll get it.
Exactly. You think if I just show them the texts, if I just tell them my side, they'll see the truth. But it is not a misunderstanding. What you are experiencing in that moment is a highly sophisticated, deeply calculated psychological phenomenon.
It's an extension of the abuse itself.
It is. It's a direct extension of the abuse you thought you had escaped, and it is perfectly engineered to basically dismantle your reality.
Which is exactly why we are dedicating this entire deep dive to unpacking this. I'm your host, and I have a massive stack of sources in front of me today. We are pulling from clinical psychology papers, trauma research, neurobiology scans, and behavioral science case notes focused on covert narcissism and emotional manipulation.
And as a clinical psychologist and trauma specialist, I can tell you these sources are incredibly illuminating. I'm thrilled to be here to break this down with you.
Me too. So the mission today is to cut through the confusion of what clinical researchers call abuse by proxy, or as it is, more colloquially known in the psychology and recovery communities, the deployment of flying monkeys.
Flying monkeys. It's such a striking term, isn't it?
It really is. And we're going to deconstruct the invisible architecture of this abuse today. We're going to figure out what is happening in the minds of the abusers, the bystanders, and importantly, what is happening to you.
Right. And I think it is worth grounding ourselves in where that term actually comes from. It originates, of course, from The Wizard of Oz.
Right, the Wicked Witch.
Yeah. If you think back to the architecture of that story, The Wicked Witch of the West, she rarely dirtied her own hands. She didn't really engage Dorothy directly for the vast majority of the narrative.
You just watched from afar.
Exactly. She sat up in her tower and she sent her winged minions to harass, capture, and terrorize her target on her behalf. She basically outsourced the harm.
Outsource the harm. Wow.
Yeah. So in the context of psychological and narcissistic abuse, flying monkeys are the third parties, the friends, family members, colleagues, sometimes even medical or legal professionals who are recruited to carry out the abuser's agenda.
But, I was reading through the notes on the origin of this term, and I realized something that totally shifts the perspective for me.
Oh, what's that?
Well, in the original story, when the Wicked Witch finally melts when the source of the control is destroyed, the monkeys do not mourn her. They actually celebrate.
Yes. That is the hidden truth of the metaphor, and it perfectly mirrors the clinical reality of abuse by proxy.
Oh, so.
Well, those monkeys were not inherently evil creatures. They were manipulated. They were conditioned. I mean, they were acting out of fear, coercion, and control.
So they're victims too, in a way.
In many ways, yes. The people attacking you in real life, the ones questioning your sanity and pushing you to drop your boundaries, are very often not malicious themselves. They are unwitting pawns in a much larger game of coercive control.
Wow, okay. So to understand how they get manipulated, we have to understand the invisible structure the abuser built around you in the first place, right?
Exactly. Because this doesn't start with those text messages. It starts years prior.
Right. And looking at our sources, this points directly to the work of clinical researcher Evan Stark. He coined a concept that completely revolutionized how we view domestic and relational abuse, the concept of coercive control.
Evan Stark's work is just foundational here. Because, for a very long time, society and the legal system only recognized abuse if there were physical bruises.
If there was a broken bone, it was abuse.
Right. But Stark pointed out that the most insidious forms of abuse leave absolutely no physical marks. Coercive control is a systematic, patterned effort to limit a target's autonomy, agency, and capacity for independent action.
It's the micromanagement of your reality.
Precisely. It is who you can text, what you wear, how you spend money, how you perceive yourself. It is essentially a hostage situation playing out in plain sight.
It's like someone building an invisible electric fence around your life. And every time you try to step out of the bounds they've drawn for you, you get shocked.
That's a really good analogy.
But to the outside world, you're just standing in an open field. They can't see the fence. So what happens when you finally sprint through the shock and leave? Because you sever their direct access to you.
And that severance triggers a massive psychological crisis for the abuser.
A crisis for them.
Oh, absolutely. For a highly manipulative, controlling, or narcissistic individual, a breakup or a firm boundary is not processed as a normal relational ending. It is processed as a severe narcissistic injury.
A narcissistic injury. Unpack that for us.
Sure. Their entire psychological scaffolding relies on the foundational belief that they are superior, omnipotent, and in control. When you leave, you shatter that illusion.
You prove they aren't totally in control.
Exactly. And to soothe this deep, unconscious psychological wound, to basically avoid facing the terrifying, profound feelings of inadequacy and shame that live underneath their grandiosity, they absolutely must reestablish control.
But they can't do it directly because, you've blocked their number or you've moved out or you've established a boundary that they aren't allowed to cross without facing consequences.
Correct. So they have to extend their control beyond the relationship. And they do this through a mechanism called triangulation.
Triangulation. Okay, let's get into that.
To understand triangulation, we look at Dr. Murray Bowen's family systems theory. Bowen observed that a two-person emotional system is inherently unstable under stress.
Like just any two people.
Yes, any diet, say a couple. When they experience severe tension, that tension becomes too much for the two of them to bear. To stabilize the anxiety, they pull in a third party.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm visualizing this right. A two-person system is like a stool with two legs. It's fundamentally wobbly.
Right.
If any weight gets put on it, it's going to fall over. So to keep it from falling, you grab a third leg. You bring in a third person to absorb some of that weight. In a normal, healthy dynamic, what does that look like?
In a healthy dynamic, that third leg might be a couples counselor, or it might be a trusted friend who listens, offers objective perspective, helps you regulate the tension, and then steps away.
They don't stick around to meddle forever.
Exactly. The third party is utilized for stabilization and resolution. But in the context of coercive control and narcissistic abuse, triangulation is weaponized.
So it's not a stool anymore, it's a puppeteer.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
The abuser is directing a play from the shadows. They pull the strings, maneuver the third parties onto the stage, and make the actors attack each other or attack you, while the abuser just sits back in the audience watching the drama unfold, all while pretending their hands are completely clean.
Yes. The third party isn't brought in to mediate or resolve tension. They are brought in to isolate the target.
Wow.
By manipulating the third party, the abuser keeps you permanently off balance. You're constantly reactive and socially isolated. The abuser maintains contact and control through the proxy without ever having to be directly accountable for the harm.
It is quite literally the outsourcing of abuse.
It is.
But for the puppeteer to get those actors on stage, they need a script, right? I mean, they can't just walk up to your sister or your mutual friend and say, hey, I need to soothe my fragile ego. Could you go emotionally terrorize my ex for me?
No, no one would agree to that.
Right. They need a deeply compelling narrative to convince the third party to act. And our sources point to a specific, highly engineered psychological script called DARVO.
DARVO, yes. This is perhaps the most important acronym for anyone dealing with a toxic individual to understand.
Let's break it down.
It stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. It was coined by researcher Jennifer Freyd, and it is the gold standard of covert psychological manipulation. And it happens sequentially.
Let's walk through how this actually looks in practice, because the mechanism here is just wild. Let's say you confront an abusive partner. You say something very simple and boundary-driven like, please do not scream at me in front of the kids. It's unacceptable.
Okay, perfect example. So step one is deny. The abuser will completely, flatly deny that the event occurred, or they will deny the severity of it.
Like, I wasn't screaming.
Right. I wasn't screaming. I was just talking passionately. You're making things up. This immediately destabilizes your grip on reality.
Because you know what you just heard.
Exactly. Then comes the attack.
They pivot.
Yes, they pivot from the event to your character. They'll say, the real problem here is that you are constantly monitoring my tone. You are so neurotic and controlling. You're always trying to start fight.
They attack your credibility and your mental state.
Yes, to put you on the defensive. And then comes the grand finale. The RVO, reverse victim and offender.
This is the part that just makes my head spin.
It is the masterpiece of the manipulation. They claim that they are the true victim of the interaction and you are the abuser.
How do they even justify that?
They'll say something like, I am walking on eggshells around you. I can't even express myself in my own home without you attacking me. You are emotionally abusing me.
Wow. So suddenly the person who is screaming in front of the children is demanding an apology from the person who asked them to stop.
Exactly. And the unconscious psychological mechanism driving this is fascinating.
What's happening underneath?
Well, the abuser is fundamentally incapable of processing shame or taking accountability, because doing so would cause a total collapse of their grandiose self-image.
But they just refuse to feel it.
Right, but they don't just repress the shame, they psychologically project it onto you. They literally vomit their emotional garbage onto you and make you carry the weight of their bad behavior.
That explains so much. But here's the piece I really want to unpack with you. When the abuser takes this Darvo script to the outside world, when they start the smear campaign, why on earth does it work so well on third parties?
That's the million-dollar question.
I mean, why do smart, rational, good people believe the abuser's version of the story?
To understand why the smear campaign works, we have to look at neuroscience. Because the abuser is often putting on a highly convincing, Oscar-worthy performance for these third parties.
Oh, the tears.
Yes, they might be weeping. They seem genuinely devastated. They tell your mutual friends, I just don't know what went wrong. I tried everything to save this relationship, but I'm so deeply worried about her mental health. She's just so unstable.
When a bystander witnesses that, what happens?
It triggers an empathy hack in their brain.
An empathy hack. Let's dig into that.
In the 1990s, neuroscientists discovered something called mirror neurons. When we observe another human being experiencing a strong emotion, especially pain or sadness, these specific neurons fire in our own brains.
So we literally mirror the emotion.
Yes. They mirror the emotional state we are witnessing. We are neurobiologically wired for empathy. It's what allowed early humans to bond and survive as a species.
So we're supposed to feel it.
We are. So, when your mutual friend sees the abuser crying and expressing deep, seemingly authentic concern for you, the friend's mirror neurons activate.
Oh, wow.
The friend physically feels a pang of distress. They are physiologically moved to respond, to comfort, and to rescue the person in pain.
There's the staggering psychological paradox. The very trait that makes someone a good, caring, decent human being, their capacity for empathy, is the exact vulnerability the abuser is exploiting.
Exactly. They are weaponizing human empathy against you.
It's so insidious.
It really is. The abuser uses the bystander's goodness as a weapon, and we have to acknowledge a crucial piece of the timeline here. This smear campaign did not start the day you left.
Right, the pre-established narrative. This is the part that makes victims feel like they're totally losing their minds.
Right. For months, maybe even years prior to the final boundary being set, the abuser has been planting seeds. They've been dropping subtle, carefully calculated hints to your community.
What does that sound like?
It's never overt at first. It's, a sigh at a dinner party followed by, yeah, she's just been so complex lately, or he's been really difficult to manage. I think work is getting to him.
Oh, that sounds so benign.
Right. Or they'll say, I'm really worried about her stability, but please don't say anything. I'm trying to handle it. They lay the foundation of the narrative brick by subtle brick.
So the stage is completely set, and then you finally snap. You endure months or years of covert abuse, and you finally set a boundary, and maybe you do it with anger.
Which is a completely normal reaction.
Right. Maybe you raise your voice. Maybe you send a text that is furious and completely justified. And what happens? You walk right into the trap they've been building for years.
Because your natural, justified, reactive anger perfectly aligns with the abuser's pre-planted narrative.
The third party sees your angry text.
Yes. They see the text or hear your frustration, and they think, wow, the abuser was right. She really is unstable and aggressive. You look like the hostile aggressor, and the abuser who provoked the entire situation gets to play the calm, wounded victim.
Okay, this brings us to the actual cast of characters on the stage. Because while the abuser's narrative is compelling, it attracts different types of people for entirely different psychological reasons.
That's a very important distinction to make.
Yeah, not all flying monkeys are created equal. And understanding their individual motives is the only way to figure out how to protect yourself. Based on our clinical sources, we can identify 5 distinct types of flying monkeys.
Let's start with the one we've been touching on, the innocent dupe, sometimes called the manipulated rescuer.
Innocent dupe. Okay.
The innocent dupe is usually a highly empathetic person, often a peacemaker type, but they lack critical thinking skills regarding manipulation and personality
They
disorders.
just assume everyone thinks like they do?
Exactly. They genuinely believe they are helping. The primary psychological mechanism trapping them is cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance. Okay, that's the psychological stress you feel when you hold 2 contradictory beliefs at the exact same time, right?
That's it.
It's like trying to force 2 repelling magnets together. Your brain just wants them to snap apart into a comfortable position.
Precisely. So this person has known the abuser as charming, helpful, perhaps charismatic. Then you come to them and describe this person as a controlling, emotionally violent predator.
And their brain just glitches.
Right. The innocent dupe's brain cannot reconcile the nice person they know with the monster you are describing. Holding those 2 conflicting realities causes immense psychological discomfort.
So what does the brain do?
It seeks the path of least resistance to resolve the tension.
And the path of least resistance is almost never, wow, I have been deeply deceived by a covert predator who fooled me completely.
Right, because that's terrifying.
Yeah. The path of least resistance is, my friend who is crying in front of me is just bitter about a breakup and is exaggerating. It's so much easier for their brain to believe that you are misunderstanding things than to accept the terrifying reality of who the abuser really is.
Exactly. They choose the comfortable lie to protect their own worldview. But the second type of flying monkey operates from a much darker place.
Okay, let's get into type 2.
This is the fearful follower, or the complicit enabler.
I have to admit, I struggle with this one. I read the notes on this type, and I feel a lot of anger toward them.
That's completely understandable.
Because the defining characteristic of the fearful follower is that they actually know the abuser is toxic. They have seen the red flags.
They are aware.
They've whispered to you in the past,
Yeah.
he gets really scary when he's mad, or I know she's totally unreasonable. But when the smear campaign starts, they abandon you and side with the abuser.
It's a massive betrayal.
It really is. And our notes say they do this out of survival instinct. But, I mean, are we giving them too much of a pass? If you throw an innocent person to the wolves just to save your own skin, aren't you just being malicious?
It is entirely valid to feel anger toward the complicit enabler because their betrayal often feels the most acute. You thought you were in the trenches together.
Right. You thought they had your back.
But clinically, we have to differentiate between active malice like enjoying the harm and cowardice born of an amygdala hijack.
Okay. Break that down for me.
In group dynamics, especially in toxic workplaces or friend groups led by a charismatic narcissist, there is a recognized phenomenon called the identified patient or the scapegoat.
The person who gets blamed for everything.
Right. The fearful follower knows that the abuser requires a target to abuse. If they stand up for you, the eye of Sauron turns toward them. They become the next target.
Wow. So it really is just primal herd mentality. They align with the perceived power, the predator, so they don't get eaten themselves.
Yes. It is a profound moral failure. Absolutely. But it's rooted in fear, not sadism. They sacrifice your psychological safety to purchase their own temporary immunity.
That's so heavy, but it makes sense.
Now, that dynamic shifts slightly when we look at the third type, which is incredibly common.
The third type.
Yes, the enmeshed believer. You see this almost exclusively in toxic family systems. This is the sibling who tells you to just be the bigger person, or the parent who demands you just keep the peace for the holidays.
Oh man, why does family do this? You would think your own family would be the first to defend you.
You would think so. But to understand this, we have to introduce the concept of systemic homeostasis. Every system, including a family, naturally seeks equilibrium.
Like a balance.
Yes. In a deeply dysfunctional or abusive family, the equilibrium is toxic, but it is predictable. Everyone plays a specific role to keep the structure standing.
What kind of roles?
Well, the abuser abuses, the enabler enables, the scapegoat takes the blame, and the golden child excels to make the family look good.
Right, everyone has a job.
Exactly. When you, as the victim, finally say, I am not playing this role anymore, this is abuse, You threaten the homeostasis of the entire family structure.
You're pulling out the bottom block in a Jenga tower.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And the enmeshed believer will do anything to stop the tower from falling.
Why, though? Just to keep things quiet.
It's deeper than that. Because if they validate your reality, if they admit that the family dynamic is abusive, it forces a catastrophic psychological reckoning for them.
Oh, wow.
They would have to confront their own unhealed trauma. They would have to acknowledge the reality of the parents who raised them or their own complicity in the dysfunction.
And that's just too much.
It is psychologically unbearable for them. It would shatter their identity. So they aggressively enforce the abuser's narrative, not necessarily because they love the abuser more, but because they are fiercely protecting their own fragile, constructed reality.
Wow. That's a huge revelation. They aren't choosing the abuser over you. They're choosing the familiar comfort of their dysfunction over the terrifying unknown of the truth. That makes so much sense.
It's tragic, but yes.
But we can't ignore the fourth type, because this is where the empathy kind of stops for me. The malicious co-conspirator.
Yes. We must be clear. Some flying monkeys are not brainwashed. They are not acting out of fear, and they are not trying to keep the peace.
They just enjoy it.
They actively enjoy the destruction. The malicious co-conspirator typically possesses high narcissistic traits themselves. They might be a secondary narcissist, a sociopath, or someone with heavy Machiavellian traits.
These are the people who just live for the drama.
It's more than just drama, though. It's about power and narcissistic supply. Participating in the smear campaign elevates their own status within the group.
Oh, so they get something out of it.
Definitely. It gives them a sense of superiority, importance, and control. They feed off the chaos and the gossip. They're willing executioners because the act of destroying your reputation provides them with psychological fuel.
Which is terrifying.
It is.
But maybe not as terrifying as the final type, because the final type holds actual institutional power over your life.
Yes, the fifth type, the institutional proxy.
Right. We are talking about therapists, HR representatives, mediators, and family court judges.
This type does the most catastrophic systemic damage.
Because they have real power.
Exactly. And the mechanism by which they are manipulated is a massive flaw in how our institutions operate. The psychological paradox of the institutional proxy is that these systems are built to value neutrality and objectivity above all else. They are trained to look for a middle ground.
But coercive control does not have a middle ground.
Exactly.
Walk me through how this plays out in a real scenario. Let's take a family court mediation, for example.
Okay. A skilled covert abuser will walk into a mediation session looking impeccably calm. They are well-dressed, articulate, and charming. They will use the language of therapy perfectly.
Therapy speak.
Yes. They will say things like, I just want what's best for the children. I am so willing to co-parent. I'm just concerned about her emotional volatility. They project total stability.
And the victim.
Meanwhile, the victim, who has endured years of coercive control, who has been gaslit, darvoed, and subjected to a smear campaign, comes into that same room highly dysregulated.
Because their nervous system is fried.
Precisely. They might be hyper-anxious, defensive, weeping, or angry.
And the mediator, who demands neutrality, looks at the calm, smiling abuser, and then looks at the frantic, terrified victim.
Right, and because they don't understand the invisible architecture of coercive control, they completely misdiagnose the situation.
That is maddening.
The system gets hijacked. The mediator or the judge views the traumatized victim as the hostile or alienating party. They view the victim's desperate attempts to protect themselves as uncooperative behavior.
And they validate the calm abuser.
They do. The very institution designed to protect the victim becomes the ultimate flying monkey, wielding the power of the state or the organization against them.
That is just, it is a total nightmare. And it brings us to a critical pivot in this deep dive.
Where are we pivoting?
We have mapped out the external threats, right? We see the abuser pulling the strings. We see the monkeys acting out their roles. But we have to look inward now. We have to examine the profound internal wreckage this causes for the target.
This is such an important part of the conversation.
Because losing your social ecosystem isn't just, relational drama. The research shows this is a severe biological trauma.
It is crucial that we move away from describing this as mere emotional distress. What the target is experiencing is known as betrayal trauma and social contamination.
Social contamination. That sounds intense.
It is. You finally manage to escape the primary abuser, which requires a monumental amount of courage. But suddenly, the ground drops out from under you again. Friends you trusted with your deepest secrets are compromised. family members are repeating the abuser's lies.
The crushing realization is that you aren't fighting a single front anymore. You thought you defeated the dragon, but now you were fighting the villagers you were trying to protect.
That's a powerful way to put it.
You are fighting your whole world. Every safe space you had is contaminated. And this isn't just a metaphor, is it? When your entire community turns its back on you, your brain physically registers it as an injury.
It does. Let's talk about Naomi Eisenberger's research.
Yes, please.
Dr. Naomi Eisenberger, a social neuroscientist at UCLA, conducted a groundbreaking fMRI study that completely changed how we understand social rejection.
What did she do?
She put participants into an fMRI scanner to monitor their brain activity and had them play a simple digital game called Cyberball.
Cyberball. Okay.
The participant thought they were playing a game of digital catch with two other real human beings connected via computer. For the first few minutes, the three avatars tossed the ball back and forth equally.
But it was a setup, right? The other two players were just a computer program.
Exactly. After a few minutes, the computer program altered its behavior. The two avatars stopped throwing the ball to the human participant in the scanner. They only threw it to each other.
Oh, wow. So they just left them out.
Yes. The participant was systematically excluded, ostracized from a meaningless digital game of catch. And when Eisenberger looked at the brain scans of the excluded participants, the results were astonishing.
What lit up?
The dorsal anterior cingulate cortex.
And what does that part of the brain do?
This is the exact same neural region that processes the distress of physical pain.
Wait, really?
Yes, the brain does not distinguish between the acute emotional pain of social rejection and the physical pain of a broken leg or a severe burn. The neural pathways are identical.
That is unbelievable. The digital game of catch triggers physical pain circuitry. Now multiply that by 1,000.
Exactly.
Imagine it's not avatars on a screen, but your sister, your best friend, and your coworkers shutting you out. No wonder victims describe this experience as feeling like they are literally dying.
And there is a profound evolutionary mechanism behind why our brains are wired this way.
Right, because of how early humans lived.
Think back to our ancient ancestors on the savannah. Being exiled from the tribe did not just mean you were lonely. It meant you were not going to be protected from predators. It meant you wouldn't get a share of the food.
Isolation was an absolute guarantee of death.
Therefore, the human brain evolved to register social rejection as a critical, immediate survival threat. When the flying monkeys initiate the smear campaign, your amygdala, the brain's fear center, sounds an alarm that says, "We have been exiled. We are going to die."
It is an autonomic overload. Your nervous system is plunged into a chronic, unrelenting state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Yes, you are running from a tiger that you can't even see 24/7.
And this chronic activation cascades into severe somatic or physical symptoms, right?
Absolutely. This is where we bring in the seminal work of Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, author of The Body Keeps the Score.
I love that book.
It's brilliant. When the brain perceives this level of systemic threat, the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands, floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline. The vagus nerve loses its ability to regulate the heart rate and digestion.
So what does that look like for the victim, day to day? How do they feel?
It manifests physically. Victims develop chronic insomnia because the brain refuses to sleep while it believes a predator is nearby.
That makes total sense. If you sleep, you die.
Right. They experience profound, bone-deep fatigue. Gastrointestinal disorders emerge because the body redirects blood flow away from digestion and toward the muscles for a fight or flight response.
Wow.
We see the development of fibromyalgia, autoimmune flare-ups, and severe hypervigilance. The body is absorbing the ongoing shockwaves of having reality dismantled.
Because it really is gaslighting on a mass scale. Gaslighting by proxy.
It is.
It's one thing if a single toxic ex tells you you're crazy. You can usually fight that off. But when 5 different people you have loved and relied on for a decade, sit you down and tell you that your memories are wrong, that you are the aggressor, and that you are unstable, the cognitive dissonance shatters your internal compass.
It does.
You start to think, well, if everyone else sees it this way, maybe I am the monster. Maybe I am the crazy one.
The systematic dismantling of a victim's internal reality is the ultimate goal of the abuser.
Which is horrifying.
Yeah.
But this forces us to zoom out even further and look through the systemic lens. We have to ask the very uncomfortable question here.
Let's ask it.
This isolation isn't just a failure of your individual friends. It is a profound failure of our culture. Why does society instinctively side with the abuser? Why is it so easy for the flying monkeys to recruit the public?
It's the myth of two sides to every story.
Two sides. We hear it constantly in our culture. You tell someone about the abuse, and a well-meaning observer says, well, relationships are complex. There's his truth and her truth, and the real truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
It sounds enlightened, but in this context, it's poison.
It is poison.
It is a lazy, deeply dangerous assumption. Society is immensely uncomfortable with psychological and covert abuse because it is invisible.
We don't want to see it.
We don't want to do the complex, exhausting work of untangling the invisible wires of coercive control. So we default to the assumption of mutual responsibility. It's easier to say, it takes two to tango.
But that's not true here.
Not at all. When one person is systematically, deliberately dismantling another person's autonomy and sanity, there are no two sides. There's a predator and there is prey.
Right.
To demand a middle ground between an abuser and a victim is to demand that the victim accept 50% of the abuse.
Wow. To demand a middle ground is to demand they accept 50% of the abuse. That is incredibly powerful. And there is a massive social script enforcing this, particularly around gender.
Oh, undeniably.
Our sources point to clinical therapist Annie Wright, who notes how heavily society relies on individuals, overwhelmingly women, to be accommodating, forgiving, and self-sacrificing for the good of the group. You are supposed to be the emotional shock absorber for the family.
Precisely. The cultural script dictates that a good person is endlessly forgiving and prioritizes peace over their own needs.
So when a victim finally says, no, I will not tolerate this abuse, I am drawing a hard line, they violently violate that cultural script.
They do. The flying monkeys who descend upon the victim are not just enforcing the abuser's will, they are essentially enforcing a societal demand. The group wants the uncomfortable tension to go away.
And history has taught them that it is much easier to pressure the victim to comply and absorb the abuse than it is to hold a highly manipulative abuser accountable.
Sadly, yes. The group prefers a quiet victim to a loud abuser.
That is heartbreaking. But here's where the research gets deeply fascinating, and it connects to something much older than the current cultural moment. Let's talk about epigenetics and intergenerational trauma.
This is a crucial piece of the puzzle. We have to look at the pioneering research of Dr. Rachel Yehuda.
What did she find?
She studied Holocaust survivors and their children, and she discovered that severe trauma actually alters gene expression. Specifically, trauma can alter the DNA methylation process, which affects how genes related to stress hormones, like cortisol, are turned on or off.
Let me make sure I understand the mechanism here. She isn't saying the DNA code itself mutates, right?
Correct. It's not a mutation.
She's saying the switches that turn the genes on and off get flipped by trauma, and those switch states are passed down to the next generation.
Exactly. The genetic sequence remains the same, but the epigenetic markers, the instructions for how the body handles stress and perceives threats, are altered and inherited.
That's wild.
It is. Dr. Yehuda found that the children of survivors had altered cortisol levels, predisposing them to anxiety and PTSD, even though they had not experienced the original trauma themselves.
So how does this apply to someone dealing with narcissistic and mouse and flying monkeys?
A victim's vulnerability to this specific type of relational abuse, their tendency to endure coercive control, to ignore their own anger, and to constantly try to keep the peace at the expense of their own soul, may not have started with them. It may be an inherited biological legacy.
Are you saying they are biologically primed for it?
Yes. If your grandmother had to subjugate her needs to survive a violently patriarchal household, her body adapted to view self-sacrifice as a survival mechanism. That epigenetic adaptation can be passed down.
Wow.
The deep-seated biological belief that love is conditional and that asserting boundaries is dangerous can make you the perfect target for a covert abuser generations later.
That is profound. You aren't just fighting an ex-partner. You might be fighting a biological legacy of compliance. Okay, so we have mapped the architecture of the abuse. We understand Darvo. We know the types of monkeys. We see the neurobiological trauma of the cerebral effect, and we recognize the societal and epigenetic pressures. Now we reach the most important part of this deep dive, reclaiming your reality.
The most crucial part.
Once you see the invisible strings of the puppeteer, how do you cut them? How do we practically protect our nervous systems from this secondary abuse?
The first, most critical and immediate step is establishing impenetrable information boundaries.
Impenetrable, so a wall.
Yes. You must stop providing the abuser and their proxies with any data about your life, your emotional state, or your reactions. This is where we utilize two highly effective behavioral strategies: the gray rock method, and its cousin, the yellow rock method.
I read a lot about gray rock, and it's brilliant in its simplicity. The concept is exactly what it sounds like. You become as uninteresting, unresponsive, and emotionally flat as a gray rock in a driveway. When a flying monkey approaches you, you give short, non-committal answers. Okay, I see. You show absolutely zero emotion, no anger, no sadness, no defense. You completely starve the flying monkeys of the dramatic emotional supply they are seeking to take back to the abuser.
That is exactly right. You become a black hole for their drama. Nothing escapes.
But there's a catch, isn't there?
There is. A gray rock can sometimes be perceived as overtly hostile or uncooperative, which can be dangerous if you are dealing with the final type of monkey we discussed, the institutional proxy.
Oh, like if you're in court.
Right. If you act like a silent stone in family court or at your HR department, you might be penalized. This is where yellow rock is necessary.
Okay, what is the mechanical difference with yellow rock?
Yellow rock maintains the exact same emotional distance and information restriction as gray rock, but you add a layer of polite, professional pleasantries.
Like saying hello, goodbye.
Yes. You say please, thank you, and have a good weekend. You smile politely. You appear entirely cooperative and reasonable to any outside observer, but you are still a fortress. You yield zero personal narrative.
Let's role play this because people need scripts. Let's say I have a coworker who I know is a flying monkey for my abusive ex. They come up to my desk, leaning in, pretending to care, and they say, "Hey, I heard about what happened with your ex. They seem really upset and said you locked them out of the joint account. What's going on? You know I'm here for you." How do I apply yellow rock?
Okay, so you provide a response that is perfectly polite, completely unassailable, and offers absolutely zero narrative supply.
Okay.
You look at them calmly and say, "I really appreciate your concern, but I prefer to keep our conversations focused on work. Did you get the email I sent about the Q3 report?"
And then I just stop talking.
Yeah.
I don't explain the bank account.
Yeah.
I don't justify my
You
actions.
do not explain, you do not justify, you do not defend, which leads to the hardest psychological revelation for survivors of this type of abuse, abandoning the defense.
Abandoning the defense.
Yes. The absolute most powerful thing you can do to reclaim your reality is to stop trying to convince the flying monkeys that you are right.
I'm going to push back on that because that goes against every single human instinct.
It does.
I mean, if I am being falsely accused of being an abuser, if someone is actively destroying my reputation with lies, my immediate instinct is to fight back. I want to pull out the receipts. I want to print out the text messages and show the mutual friends, "Look, see, I'm innocent, they're lying."
Yeah.
If I don't defend myself, don't they win?
I understand that instinct completely. It is the brain's desperate attempt to correct the injustice. But you must ask yourself, why does defending yourself fail in these situations?
Why does it?
It fails because you cannot logic someone out of a position they didn't logic themselves into. The flying monkeys are operating on cognitive dissonance, fear, or malice, not facts.
So by presenting facts, I'm just playing a game they aren't even participating in.
Worse than that, by frantically trying to clear your name, you are actually playing right into the abuser's Darvo script.
Oh my gosh.
Remember, the script says you are unstable, controlling, and aggressive. When you run around to mutual friends with stacks of printed text messages desperately trying to prove your innocence, you look frantic. You look defensive. You inadvertently validate the smear campaign.
Wow.
Furthermore, you are providing the narcissist with the ultimate supply. You are proving that they still have the power to control your emotional state and dictate your actions.
That is a brutal realization, but it makes perfect sense. The fight itself is the trap.
Exactly.
So if I drop the rope, if I abandon the defense, what do I do in all that agonizing injustice I'm holding inside?
You must move toward radical acceptance. You have to radically accept that they are committed to misunderstanding you. You cannot control their perception. You can only control your own reality. And that radical acceptance is what clears the path for true relational and somatic healing.
Because reading about gray rock and Darvo is helpful, but intellectualizing the trauma doesn't heal the body.
Exactly. As Dr. Sue Johnson, the developer of emotionally focused therapy, points out, our deepest wounds are relational, and therefore they must be healed relationally.
Right.
Psychoeducation is a wonderful first step, but it is not enough to reset a traumatized nervous system. You cannot just think your way out of the cyberball effect.
The body keeps the score, and the body needs to physically discharge the trauma. How do we do that?
Victims need specialized trauma-informed therapy. Modalities like somatic experiencing or EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing are vital.
How does the EMDR work?
In EMDR, for example, the therapist guides you to recall a traumatic memory while simultaneously engaging in bilateral stimulation, like following a moving light with your eyes or tapping alternate knees.
And that helps.
Yes, this taxes the brain's working memory, allowing the trauma to be reprocessed and stored in the cortex without the visceral, overwhelming emotional charge attached to it. It physically rewires how the body holds the memory. You must heal in connection with a safe, validating professional who understands coercive control.
And as part of that somatic healing, there is a massive reframing that has to happen around the concept of anger.
This is so vital.
Because in our culture, especially for victims, we are taught that anger is a character flaw. If you are angry, you are bitter. If you're angry, it proves the flying monkeys, right? You are the crazy, hostile one.
We must completely dismantle that shame. Anger is not a character flaw. Anger is your psyche's built-in security system.
I love that.
It is your body's neurological way of saying, a boundary was violated, I was harmed, and I deserve better. When you have been systematically gaslit and told that your perception is wrong, finally allowing yourself to feel your justified anger without shame is a radical, beautiful act of recovery.
It's an awakening.
It means your internal alarm system is coming back online. It means you are coming back to life.
It is the restoration of your internal compass.
Yeah.
You are finally trusting your own perception of north and south again, rather than the distorted funhouse mirror reality imposed by the abuser and their proxies. So let's synthesize this journey we've been on today. We started by looking at the insidious, invisible architecture of coercive control and how the abuser uses triangulation to build a cage without bars. We unmasked the psychological hack of Darvo and how the abuser weaponizes human empathy through mirror neurons to recruit flying monkeys.
Right.
We broke down the 5 types of those monkeys, from the innocent dupe suffering cognitive dissonance to the institutional proxy blinded by neutrality. We stared directly at the profound neurobiological impact of losing your social world, understanding that the brain processes social rejection as literal physical pain.
Yes, the cyberball effect.
And finally, we found a path to empowerment through information boundaries, abandoning the defense, and somatic healing.
It is a profound journey for any survivor. And as we close this deep dive, I want to leave the listener with one final provocative shift in perspective regarding the aftermath of this abuse.
What's that?
When you set your boundary and the smear campaign does its work, the flying monkeys will abandon you. The invitations will stop coming, the group chats will go silent.
And that hurts.
And when that silence settles in, the ensuing isolation feels like a punishment. It feels like you have lost the war. But I challenge you to look at that emptiness differently.
What if that emptiness isn't a void? What if it's a quarantine?
Precisely. What if the universe hasn't abandoned you at all? What if, instead, it has forcefully cleared away a deeply contaminated, toxic social ecosystem?
Wow.
The flying monkeys leaving your life is undeniably painful, but it is a necessary sterilization process. Through their departure, they are removing the infection, leaving behind a sterile, safe environment.
To heal.
Yes. And within that quiet, untouched, unmanipulated space, perhaps for the very first time in your entire life, your true, authentic self finally has the safety, the light, and the room to take root and grow.
A sterile quarantine for the soul. I love that so much. So the next time your phone buzzes with a text from someone demanding that you compromise your reality just to keep their peace, remember the Wicked Witch.
Remember what happened to her.
Remember that you hold the scissors and the strings have been cut. And realize that the profound silence that follows isn't a punishment at all. It's the sound of your freedom.